Throughout American history, people have gathered to raise their voices, marching in the streets, carrying signs, chanting slogans, or simply standing still in silence to call for change. Protesting in its many forms is woven into the fabric of our nation. It's a tradition that dates back to before the United States even existed. One of the earliest and most famous protests was the Boston Tea Party in 1773, when colonists, frustrated by taxation without representation, dumped an entire shipment of British tea into the harbor. That act of defiance helped ignite the American Revolution. More than a century later, in the early 1900s, thousands of women marched down city streets demanding the right to vote. They held banners, gave speeches, and sometimes faced arrest, but they didn't stop. And in 1920, their voices were finally heard with the ratification of the 19th Amendment. Now, in the 1960s, peaceful protests became a cornerstone of the civil rights movement. From the Montgomery bus boycott to the March on Washington, ordinary people, students, clergy, parents, risked their safety to stand up against injustice. Their efforts helped lead to the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. But not every protest makes its history books. Some happen quietly, in small towns with only a handful of people holding signs. Others take the form of art installations, hunger strikes, or even just a single person refusing to sit down, like Rosa Parks did in 1955. So the question remains, do protests actually work? The answer is, not always right away. But often they do. Protests can bring attention to causes that might otherwise be overlooked. They can shift public opinion, change policies, and inspire others to act. Sometimes the results are immediate. Other times it takes years. And in some cases, the effects are felt not in laws, but in culture, attitudes, and awareness. Environmental protests led to the first Earth Day in 1970, and eventually the creation of an Environmental Protection Agency. Labor protests throughout the early 20th century brought us safer workplaces, minimum wage laws, and the 40-hour work week. And disability rights activists, through years of protests and advocacy, helped bring about the Americans with Disability Acts in 1990. Even when protests don't lead to immediate policy change, they often plant seeds. A protest can spark a conversation. A conversation can shift a perspective, and over time, those shifts can become movement. Some of the most powerful protests in history have been peaceful. Others have used music, poetry, or performance to deliver their message. Some are spontaneous, others are carefully organized. But what they all have in common is people who care deeply enough to speak up. In a country built on the idea that every voice matters, protests isn't just a right, it's a reflection of who we are. It reminds us that democracy doesn't only happen on Election Day. It happens when we stand up, speak out, and work together for a better future. And whether you disagree or agree with a protest or not, one thing is certain: change rarely happens without someone, somewhere, having the courage to begin. From Real Good News, I'm Diane Kirsh.